share my screen. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start off the session for tonight. Okay. All right, cool. So good evening again, everyone. My name is Tolu Yesufu, and I'll be taking you on stakeholder management tonight. Within the next couple of minutes that we have left, I know it's less than an hour now, but we'll crack on with it. So I'm a certified safe agile Scrum Master, a certified business analyst, and certified and experienced product owner as well. Currently working as a Scrum Master and a product owner. Some of the things we'll look at, two high-level points is what is stakeholder management, and how do we manage stakeholders and their expectations. And this is very useful for not just the BAs, it's useful for whatever role that you find yourself working in, because you will be working with stakeholders on different levels. And it's important that you understand how you work with your stakeholders, how you manage your stakeholders, and how you manage their expectations as well. I'm going to be running through my slides as quickly as I can. So if you do have any questions, maybe we'll have 2 minutes at the end where we can take questions. So do bear with me. I just want to go through as much as I can within the time that we have for tonight's session. So some of the points we'll look at is who is a stakeholder? Who has stakeholders? Or who is a stakeholder? What is stakeholder management? Stakeholder management plan. What is that? Managing stakeholders' expectations, change process and control. Winning over difficult stakeholders. That is one thing we always encounter at our different places of work on the projects that we work on. There will be 1 or 2 stakeholders here and there that you will have to work with and manage as well. Stakeholder power interest analysis, we call it the stakeholder matrix. What is that? What is it used for? And project stakeholder impact analysis as well. And then we'll look at the stakeholder involvement using the RACI mapping. Now, very quickly, who is a stakeholder? So you would see I've summarized it on the screen there for us to say a stakeholder is an individual or a group or organization, anyone that has an interest in or is affected by a business venture or project and its outcome. So it could be an individual, it could be an organization, it could be a group of people that are actively involved in that project or whose interest may be affected. So even if they are not actively physically participating in the development of the project, it still doesn't mean they're not stakeholders. They're still stakeholders because it might just mean that their interest may be affected if the project does not go as planned. So it could be individuals, organizations, or groups that are actively involved in the project or whose interest may be affected by the outcome of a project. Those are your stakeholders. And we'll look at a couple of examples of who stakeholders are. Now, bear in mind as well that a stakeholder or stakeholders can be either internal or external parties. So you have people like customers. Your customers can be referred to as stakeholders. The employees, even the developers, the testers, the Scrum Master, the product owner, the BAs, business partners, team members, sponsors, investors, suppliers, and even the government can all be referred to as stakeholders. And you will see that I highlighted a couple of them here. You have your clients, you have your external vendors. We also call them the third-party software providers, the project team, your subject matter experts, your sponsors. These are some of the people that you can actually call stakeholders, not limited to this list though. Now, now that we understand on a high level who our stakeholders are, who is a stakeholder, who are stakeholders, we have an understanding of that now. Now, what is the process of stakeholder management? Now you know your stakeholder. How do you go about managing the stakeholders? There's a process to it. And you need to have an understanding of what that process is in order for you to be able to effectively manage those stakeholders. Now, the process of stakeholder management, that it refers to the process of identifying your stakeholders, analyzing their needs and their expectations, and then planning and implementing various tasks to engage them throughout the product development process. So you would see there that basically it is all about monitoring, managing, and improving your relationships with those stakeholders we just identified, because they play a very significant role in the product's life. So the first thing, you cannot manage a stakeholder if you don't know who those stakeholders are. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to identify the stakeholder. That is the first step in stakeholder management. Identify the stakeholders of your project. Now, how do you identify your stakeholders? We've had this question in the past. You can do it by brainstorming with your team members, speaking to your line manager, speaking to your team members, speaking to your product owner. And then once you've identified those stakeholders, yeah, you now know who they are. You want to make a list of all the possible people that might be positively or negatively affected by your project. Now you've identified them. Now you've spoken to different people. You've spoken to your team. You've spoken to your product owner. You've spoken to your line manager, whoever it is that you've identified that can help you put that list together. Now you've identified your stakeholders. Now you've put your list together. Now, what some of the things you need to take into consideration when you're putting this list together is those who are interested in your project. Who are those that are interested in your project? Who are those people that would support? Who are those people that would support your project? Who are those people who will support your project? Who are those people who have power over your project? Who are those people, surprisingly, who want your project to fail? Now, believe it or not, you might find one or two of such people within stakeholders. And that is where you have stakeholders that have conflict amongst them. You need to manage that well so that you don't find yourself in the center of that conflict. So who are those stakeholders that possibly might want your project to fail? Who are those stakeholders, very important, that are investing in your project? And who are those stakeholders who might benefit from your project? You want to identify those stakeholders. Now, once you're done identifying your stakeholders, what do you do next? Now we have a list. Now we know who the stakeholders are. We want to then go ahead and analyze and prioritize the stakeholders. So once you have created the list of all possible stakeholders, you need to start analyzing and evaluating them so that you can then map them. So we have something we call the stakeholder matrix, the stakeholder mapping, and we'll take it, it's on one of the slides. We'll get there in a few minutes. You've identified your all possible stakeholders. Now you need to analyze and evaluate them, because then you would then be able to map them on your stakeholder matrix. This essentially means that you can then categorize your identified stakeholders on where they should belong on that matrix. And we'll go into that, like I said, in a few minutes. Now, you want to learn about your stakeholders. Now that you have successfully identified, you have successfully analyzed and categorized your stakeholders, the next step you want to do is you want to dig a little bit deeper and learn more about them. It's very important that we know our stakeholders and we understand our stakeholders. So some of the questions you want to start asking yourself about your stakeholders at this stage can be, where do they stand regarding your project, regarding your organization? Where do they stand? What impact do they have on your project, positive or negative, like we spoke about before? What is their opinion of your organization, their opinion of your project? Now, when I say opinion of your organization, remember we said stakeholders can be internal or external. So what is the opinion of your organization or the project? You want to have in-depth understanding. What are their interests? Does this stakeholder have financial interest, or is it your social interest, environmental interest, personal interest, or emotional interest? What are their interests? So getting to know your stakeholders in depth will help you focus on focus your messaging on topics that matters most to them to help you engage with them better. When you know your stakeholders, when you understand your stakeholders, it helps you, it gives you that in-depth understanding and helps you to focus on how you want to better engage with them. And then apart from that, one thing you want to have with your stakeholders is trust. You want to have a relation, you want to build a professional working relationship with them. And in order to do that effectively, you need to make sure that you're able to also gain their trust. A stakeholder who doesn't trust you will probably not even want to speak to you. So you want to make sure that you gain their trust. Now, develop a communication plan. So I have the identify stakeholders. So you would see that what I'm saying is it's matching with what is on the screen. I might not say it word for word because I'm just trying to flow because of time. Develop a communication plan. Identify stakeholders' preferred communication method. Now, in everything that we do, even aside from the IT world, even in our normal daily life, even with friends, with family, we understand that communication is key. Communication is key. When you don't communicate effectively, things get misunderstood. And when things get misunderstood, conflicts arises. And aside from conflicts arising, there's a possibility that communication that is not effective might negatively impact your project when communication is not passed across effectively. So communication is one of the main elements used in stakeholder management. One of the key elements. So the next step here in stakeholder management is you must be able to make a communication plan. Have a communication plan so that you can deliver the right message to the right stakeholder at the right time. Now, you would see that when I'm speaking, I'm trying to emphasize a bit more on certain words because this is really important, even if you're a QA, irrespective of your role. Right? So communication is key. Have a communication plan. It would help you to deliver the right message to the right stakeholder at the right time. Because remember, all stakeholders do not have the same interest and the same power. If, for example, Wumi is a stakeholder, I'm a stakeholder, there might be things you will come to me and communicate with me, or questions you bring to me, or clarifications that you need. I might not be the right stakeholder to actually respond to those questions or help you clarify those things. It might be Wumi. So you need to have a communication plan in place. You need to understand what I, as a stakeholder, I'm able to support you with, or what you would come to me for, and I'm able to, of course, questions I'm able to answer. Right? So for that, you need to have a stakeholder profile in hand. Now, your stakeholder profile, where you can use Excel, you can use whatever engagement plan, you can put an engagement plan together using Excel itself. You need to have a stakeholder profile in hand. Now, your stakeholder profile will list out your stakeholders' needs, their interests, their responsibilities, their levels of power and goals, communication channels, preferred communication method. So that plan would include things like the key message with the description of the type of information you want to communicate, engagement approach, communication channels like person-to-person, emails, video calls. Wumi as a stakeholder might be somebody who she might not be good with emails. So you can send emails to Wumi for the next 4 days. She might not get to read all your emails and respond probably until next week. So maybe Wumi is a stakeholder that would rather jump on a call with you and speak to you on the call and help clarify questions on the call. I, on the other hand, I might just be a stakeholder, I probably just don't like jumping on calls all the time. I don't have the time. I would rather just go through emails and respond to your emails. So you need to understand the communication channels. What's my preferred mode of communication? What is Wumi's preferred mode of communication? How frequently do I want to be communicated with? How frequently do I want you to give me updates? Do I need weekly updates? Do I need bi-weekly updates? These are things that when you meet your stakeholders, when you get to meet your stakeholders, you've identified them. When you get to meet them for the first time, you jump on calls with them. These are the kind of questions you want to check with them. Oh, so Wumi, I just want to check with you, if I do want to send you like weekly updates on progress of the project, how often would you like me to send updates to you? Would you like me to send updates to you like at the end of every week, or would you like me to send updates to you, every 2 weeks? What's your preferred time frame? And we might say, actually every week, every 2 weeks is fine. Okay, so what's your preferred mode of me saying, would you rather me, are you okay with a Word document, or would you rather a PowerPoint slide? Questions like that, you want to understand their preferred mode of communication, frequency of engagement. It doesn't mean that if something comes up, you cannot reach out to them. You can reach out to them. If something urgent comes up, or there's something you need to clarify, but you need to know who to speak to about what, who can help you with what. Yeah. Now, moving on, engage with stakeholders. Now, this is where you would actually execute your communication plan. Like I mentioned earlier on, choose an appropriate communication approach based on the type of stakeholder that you are dealing with. What communication approach does that stakeholder prefer? Concentrate on the most important stakeholders first and the less important ones later, because those most important ones, those ones that might probably, pull the plug on the project, kind of thing. You want to make sure that you're keeping them satisfied. You want to concentrate on the most important stakeholders first. So refer back to your stakeholder power interest grid. That's what I call the stakeholder matrix or the stakeholder mapping. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. Look at your stakeholder mapping and look at who are those most important stakeholders that I need to communicate with, or that I need to send this to, or that I need to share this with, or that I need to speak to about this. Yeah. Now, monitor your stakeholders. So no stakeholder management process is complete without your monitoring and reviewing. So make sure that you are constantly observing and monitoring your stakeholders and make updates as you go. Have your stakeholders' opinions changed? Are there any issues that they might be facing? Have they shifted to a different category in the power interest grid? That's the stakeholder mapping. Because again, on that mapping, on that grid, which we will take a look at soon, on that grid, even if you have a stakeholder with high power, low interest, it doesn't mean that that grid is set in stone. Stakeholders can move around the grid. So you need to understand, has this person's category changed on the grid? Okay, moving on. Okay, so we've gone through monitor your stakeholders. Now, there's another thing that I want to touch on as well that I think we should also take a note of: conducting stakeholder SWOT analysis. So a stakeholder SWOT analysis, I would say it's used to identify your stakeholders' strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and threats. And that would help you to deeply analyze the key stakeholders of your project. You would see that we're talking about identifying, analyzing, and engaging with stakeholders. So there are different templates that you can use. There are different ways that you can use in actually managing your stakeholders. You just need to, first of all, identify them, analyze them, understand their preferred mode of communication, and keep them engaged. Yeah. Now, moving on. Keep stakeholders in the loop. So you want to make sure that you're updating your stakeholders as at when you've agreed that you will share updates with them. If there's an update that has come up, maybe and you really need to share the updates with them, and it's maybe you've agreed that every 2 weeks you will give them updates, but now something urgent has come up and you want to share with them, you can request to, you can send it via an email, or if it's a stakeholder that you can get on a call, you can request to jump on a call with them if they're available, or set put something in the calendar for them to have a chat with them and give it. But make sure that you are transparent and keeping them in the loop. Yeah. Now, manage stakeholders differently. Not all stakeholders are the same. You cannot manage all stakeholders the same way, like I've mentioned earlier. Understand your stakeholders, know your stakeholders' preferred mode of communication, know their preferred mode of engagement, know their preferred times of engagement. Note all of these things and manage them differently. Now, let's look at change, process, and control. I've got a couple of bullet points here that I will run through very quickly. We work in an agile environment, and we know that we're flexible. Agile is flexible, so we're open to change. We're not rigid when it comes to change. But when there is a change, it doesn't mean that all changes, we will take all changes on board. But what we would do is we would, of course, look at the changes that are, that are coming our way, and we look at how, what value is this adding to what we're doing? Do we need to deprioritize some of the things we're working on and then prioritize these new changes? There will be a conversation that needs to be had, with stakeholders or whatever angle or whoever is bringing in these changes. So we're flexible. So we should embrace change. We should embrace change and adapt to these changes, especially if these changes are going to be adding value to the users. Yeah, design to customize expectations. Now, the ability to demo working applications, which is what we do within the space, means that you can design for your customers' expectations. Now, you don't want to go and assume, because you would see some people would just go and say, oh, actually, they've requested for a blue color on the background here. And because you haven't specifically gotten the shade of blue that they want, you just go, I think it will be royal blue. And then you go for that. Design to customize expectations so that you can avoid rework. And if you're not clear, then ask questions, go back to them and get clarity. Because when they're expecting you to deliver something to them at a point, and then you deliver the wrong thing because you haven't asked the right questions, then there will be need for rework, because they would then say that this is not what we asked for. So we want to make sure that we are managing and controlling, because then that change is not coming from them. It is us who haven't asked the right questions. It is also have assumed what they want. So we need to design. So we need to manage that by making sure that we're asking the right questions. If you're not sure, we're going back to them and we're designing to their expectations. Emphasize user stories from the start. Now, with agile development, teams address the highest value stories in the earliest iterations. And these are stories that are most visible or most necessary for customers. So the earlier the development team addresses technology challenges, the better the customers would. And these customers, remember we said they are also stakeholders. So the earlier the team addresses technology challenges, the better the customers will understand how the application works. So your user story prioritization helps to manage delays and changes earlier in the development cycle rather than at the end. So it's far easier and less costly. So that way we are managing the change process and we're controlling it as well. So we need to also be aware of these things, because remember, the customers are stakeholders. The business is also, the stakeholders. We have the investors there as well. So there are things that we want to make sure that we get right on our side to avoid or to manage any change process or control change request or process that might be coming our way, based on the fact that because we did not ask the right questions or we did not follow best practice or follow the process that has been set. Yeah. Review and prioritize changes. So when product owners introduce changes during iterations, they must prioritize them for the development team. So there's a change that has come in. Now, Scrum Masters as well, this is where you come in. The change has come in. The product owner has come in with a change, maybe from a request from the customers or from the business, right? And you just take it in and you just work on it. You just take it, oh, yeah, we'll do it because, yeah, it's a change. Yeah, it's priority for them, my priority. We can do it. Learn how to say no without saying no. Learn how to manage expectations, stakeholders' expectations. Let them know what they can get, when they can get it. If you're not sure then speak to your developers. They know what the work would involve. They can estimate the effort required for the work, and they can tell you. And then you can then relate that back to the product owner. So when the product owner introduces any change during iterations, those changes need to be prioritized for the team. Compare the stories that you already have within your sprint and how this change would affect those stories, and look at what do we need to deprioritize in order for us to prioritize this new change that has come in. Manage between sprints. So avoid change management in agile projects in the middle of an iteration. So when it doesn't mean that you cannot take in change in the middle of an iteration, but again, it just boils down to the fact that there has to be conversations to be had. So don't shy away from those conversations. Don't shy away from those conversations. Learn how to say no without saying no. So we're not saying that we cannot take this change in, but what we're saying is in order for us to bring these changes in, then what do we need to bring out of that sprint, How do we manage this? Because when you take it on without actually having these conversations, what you're saying to your product owner, what you're saying to your stakeholders is that with everything you already have within your sprint and the changes that have been brought in, you can actually work on them and complete them. Now, what happens if you then end up not completing half of that work? Have you managed your stakeholders' expectations well? Because this is they're expecting you to actually deliver all of this at the end of the sprint because you haven't said anything. So you have not managed your stakeholders. You have not managed the process well without asking those questions. Communicate with your developers. Some of us, there might be certain languages that developers, they speak, and we're wondering, oh, okay, I don't understand this, I don't understand that, because we might not be as technical as they are sometimes. So what happens is, if there's something that you don't understand, maybe there's a change that has come in, always check with your developers, communicate with them, speak to them. All right, so this has come in, we have this. But in order for us to take this in, can we estimate how much effort will this take? Would we be able to complete this with the work that, because it might just be something that the developers will tell you, oh, Tolu, this is actually a quick one to work on. This is not going to take us much time. You can actually bring it into sprints. With all the other tickets we have, oh yeah, Tolu, we can do this. Okay, estimate, tell me how much effort will this take, for us to complete. And they say, oh, Tolu, it's actually a small effort, or it's actually, we can do this in 3 days. Do you get what I mean? That way, we're like, okay, that's fine. The developers are happy to bring this in. They're happy to work on this with the other tickets we have in the sprint. They can actually complete it. And I'm saying to them, think of the risk, think of all the unknowns before we bring this in. So they've taken all of this into consideration. In the view that the developers now says to me that this is actually a big piece of work, there's no way we can finish this in the sprint. In fact, before we take this work into any sprint, we need to have like a investigation done first for us to understand certain things. Then I go back and I say, okay, actually, we're happy to take on this request. But before we can take this into development, we need to carry out certain investigation for the developers to understand A, B, C, and D. That way, I haven't said no to the stakeholders, but I've said to them, we will take this into our other sprints, but for this sprint, we're happy to carry out an investigation first. So I have actually not said no to them. So it's just understanding how to communicate these things to your stakeholders. Yeah. And the same thing, working very closely with your testers as well, handling changes efficiently. So, of course, in some, you will find some organizations, they will say, okay, we're working in an agile environment, agile ways of working. Yeah, but then they still go through something that we call gated development approaches. Where certain things have to go through certain gates and, get certain approvals, before you can actually then start picking them up for work kind of thing. So yeah, different organizations with how they work. So in some gated development approaches, the team handles changes through a change control board. Yeah, this change control board, or sometimes, at my place of work, we call them the governance board. Or some people might call them change control board. They discuss and then they accept or reject proposals. And this can actually take a lot of time, which is why we don't encourage it in Agile per se. It can take an excessive amount of time, and it's counter to the Agile approach. But with change management in Agile, the team needs efficiency. So don't wait days. You don't have to wait for days or weeks or months for a change decision from a set of board. That's how Agile should work. Unfortunately, some companies, they still say they work in the Agile way, but yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. So, you don't have to wait for weeks, days, months for a change decision from a set of governance board or change control board or whatever they call it. The product owner must gather the development team together to discuss the change. Excuse me, to discuss the change and agree on how we want to work as a team on these changes that we're getting from the customers or the users or the business. Manage customers' expectations. The PO, the team must communicate with customers prior to the application release, but also communicate very closely with them during the course of development. So you're not waiting till the application finally gets released. During the process, you are also keeping constant communication with them. They should understand what to expect in a release. What has changed? In this new release, from the last release, what has changed? What do we have in the last release that we no longer have in this release, and why? What do we have in the last release that has been improved in this release? We need to make sure we keep communication alive with them and manage their expectations. Okay. So I think I've run through that very quickly. Moving on to the next slide. How to deal with stakeholders changing requirements. Okay, pay attention to communication. Keep your internal and external lines of communication open and receptive. Be direct and ensure that you understand everything expected of your team. Yeah. So if there are any implications or additions or changes or on your project on project constraints, instead of you reading between the lines, instead of you thinking, oh, I'll just summarize it, they will understand. Spell out the details. If it's on the stakeholder side, ask them to spell out the details. Ask for clarifications. The stakeholders, bear in mind, they may not always know what it takes from your side as a team to fulfill their expectations. They might not understand, some of them might not understand all the technicalities involved. So make sure that instead of reading between the lines, ask to spell out the details, or you spell out the details to them if it's on your side. Create a requirement approval process. So with the help of your stakeholders. So from everything I've been saying, I'm sure you can see how closely you need to work with these guys. With the help of your stakeholders, establish a procedure that lays out the sequence of action and interaction moving forward with your project. Yeah? When you have a standard process in place, it ensures that any deviation is picked up. Any change is recognized and picked up. Any hindrance is picked up. So this brings order to collaboration between yourself and your stakeholders, and it makes it a better structured process. You want to have a structure in place that works, and you want to make sure that that structure works as well for your stakeholders. When you work in an organized and mutually agreeable manner, it prevents occurrences of conflicts. It most likely will prevent occurrences of conflict. So create a requirement approval process and agree with your stakeholders. It might be in a workshop, it might be on a call with your stakeholders, but have something created and what works for you. It might sound like a lot of documentation, but trust me, it's not a lot of documentation. It's only because I'm going through these bullet points that it might sound like, oh my God, I have to keep a stakeholder matrix, I have to keep a requirement approval process, I have to keep an engagement plan, I have to keep, it sounds like a lot, but it's really not. Yeah, spend more time in requirement analysis. So this, I mean, it sounds simple enough, but it's a given. Looking at the number of projects that fails, there are lots of projects that has failed due to poor requirement management. So spend enough time, spend adequate time in understanding the problem. Understand the problem statement that motivates the project. Understand the problem statement that motivates the existing system that you are replacing. Leave no detail of requirements gathered from stakeholders inadequately analyzed. Do not leave any detail of any requirements that you have gathered from your stakeholders. Do not leave any detail inadequately analyzed. And I mentioned, for example, I used an example earlier on. I said they probably would say, oh, we want this page, the background of this page to be blue. And you just go, oh, okay, contact us page, background color blue. Have you actually asked them, do they have a preference on the shade of blue? And what is that preference? So there are some tiny details that if we get wrong, might actually affect our release or our deliverables, if you get what I mean. Yeah? Get clear SLAs, service level agreements. So make sure that you have SLAs in place, something that would be carefully worded, something that, like an agreement that clearly states the terms of the collaboration, the work environment, and deliverables before you begin. So this most likely will probably be maybe at the start of the project. So if there's one within the organization that needs to be done, make sure you get it done and signed off as well. Trying to move on very quickly. Be flexible and adaptable within reason. So be flexible, be receptive, be reasonable. Sometimes it might actually be best. Sometimes it might be best to assume that requirements are subject to change. Do you know that? Because when you're looking at it to say, oh, we've gathered these requirements, yeah, set in stone. That's what it is. Sometimes have it at the back of your mind that things might change. So be ready for those changes if they do come in. Be flexible. And when they come in, be adaptable to those changes within reason. And within reason, like I said earlier on, have conversations around, okay, how big is this? What's the estimate for this requirement, for this change? Can we take it in? If not, what can we take in? What can we bring out? Or when can we take it in? So be flexible and be adaptable within reason. With that approach, you would establish a positive relationship with your external stakeholders and increase your chances of getting approvals from them. Convey the impact of specific changes. So some stakeholders may not fully understand the indirect impact of the changes in terms of developers' hours and cost. So it's easy for a stakeholder to say, oh, we want this change, we want that change, we want this added in, we want that removed. Sometimes some of them may not fully understand the indirect impact that these changes actually have on persons' hours and other costs. So be upfront on how specific changes can lead to unexpected complications and delays in the project. If we agreed on a release date, we have a release date, and we've already, we're nearing the release date, and you bring in a massive change, and you say this is high priority, it needs to go in. And the developers have actually looked at this change, they've estimated it, and we have, say, maybe a month left before release. And the developers are saying, actually, we need 6 weeks to work on this requirement, to develop this requirement. 6 weeks means that we will be working on this 2 weeks post-release. So we need to make sure that we're discussing and having that conversation with the stakeholders to let them know the impact that changes would have, the complications that it would have, in terms of it could delay the project, because some of them do not understand which changes would lead to significant ripple effects. So the onus is on us to make sure that we spell these things out to them. And not just it's not just me telling them this and them saying, oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah. 2 weeks isn't bad. Yeah, we can do with an additional 1 month. You actually want to get us that in a written document, maybe via an email. Okay, please, could you just confirm that to me via email? Because you want to make sure that you have an evidence to say that, yeah. And then, of course, you want to make sure that that is communicated to all the other stakeholders so that everyone is aligned and on the same page. Use requirement management software to set a change control process. So establish a foolproof change control strategy to say that if there is a change that comes through, how do we manage it? How do we control it? Have a process in place. Establish a prototyping mechanism. So gathering requirements using a limited prototype is attractive to users since it allows key stakeholders to envision what different parts of the products may look like. And they can then check if they have any concerns going ahead. So when sometimes, it's good to actually show them like a prototype of what they might be getting or what they could be getting based on what they've asked for. So when they see it visually, sometimes it helps them to then look at the different parts of that product and what it may look like. And then, they might say, oh, we have concerns around this area, or no, okay, can we make this? So sometimes it's, it's good to put that right in front of them as well. Okay. Moving forward very quickly, how to win over difficult stakeholders, accept their authority. They are stakeholders, irrespective of even if they have low interest, low power on the project, they are still stakeholders. So accept their authority. Of course, if you can advise, but if they're standing their ground, oh, no, that's how we want it, this is how accept the authority. But again, like I said, if it has anything to do with that, would impact your project, make sure you have a written confirmation. Remove negative emotions. Now, sometimes, we might feel like, oh, it's because of the way I speak, or it's because of my skin color, or it's because of, that's why that stakeholder doesn't speak to me. If Claire reaches out, it speaks to Claire. When I reach out, it doesn't really respond to me all the time. Remove negative emotions. Don't feel like it always has to do with you. Don't do whatever within your power that you can do. If you're having difficulties, engaging with the stakeholder, then speak to maybe your product owner or your line manager and look at how best. But the fact remains also that if you have done your identification and analysis and, gotten all those in-depth details from the start, you would already have clear understanding of how to best relate. In saying that, you might still come across some difficult stakeholders, but try not to make it all about you, because it doesn't necessarily always is about you. That, okay, it's because I'm this, it's because I'm that. So right from the start, some people are quick to come up with such excuses. They come up with it very quickly. So try not to let that be you. Understand their negativity. Sometimes we look at some difficult some stakeholders and we say, oh, that stakeholder is so difficult. I can't even get to engage with him. He's not responding to my emails. It's not picking up my calls. It's not responding to my messages and all of that. Understand their negativity. Not all difficult stakeholders are difficult because they want to be difficult. I had a stakeholder that I always thought, I would always say, oh, this person is so difficult because I tried engaging with this stakeholder for about 4 weeks or 6 weeks. No response to my email, nothing, no response to my messages on Slack. It just wasn't responding. And I was like, I need this stakeholder. This is a stakeholder that has high level of interest, high level of impact on this. I need this stakeholder. I need to speak to this stakeholder and get certain requirements from the stakeholder. So I spoke to my line manager. My line manager said, oh, actually, I should have told you, like, it's hard to get this guy via email. If you want to get this guy, it's best you go through his PA. And I didn't know that, because I hadn't even gotten the chance to speak to him for 1 day. There was no way I could get his preferred mode of communication. There was no way I could have understanding of, how best to get through to him. And immediately I sent the PA a message, and the PA responded to my message immediately and got me a slot in that stakeholder's calendar for 2 days after. That's a stakeholder that I tried to reach out to for 6 weeks. And I got to speak to this stakeholder within 3 days of actually reaching out to the PA. So, and when I spoke to this guy, I can say till date, it's probably one of the nicest, most relatable stakeholder that I've worked with. And I already tagged this person as a difficult stakeholder. So sometimes understand their negativity. Some of them have their calendar maxed out, that to even get a slot to meet with them in their calendar, oh my God, it's hard, because they're jumping on calls, they're jumping into meetings. So understand their negativity and just find ways to try and make sure that you get through to them. Ask for advice and listen. Okay, so this is what we've done, this is what we're doing, this is what are your thoughts? What do you think, Ralph? What do you think, Shegun? What are your thoughts, Tokumbo? Ask for the advice and listen when they give this advice. Listen, so that it doesn't look like the next time you're asking for the advice, they just feel like, well, the last advice I gave, it wasn't listened to. I didn't hear anything back. So what's the point? Ask and listen. Be tactful and honest. Always be honest with your stakeholders. Be open with your stakeholders. Carry them along. If something is going to be late, let them know it's going to be late. If there's a risk to something, I like those risks ASAP with them. Let them know, be honest with them. That way you would gain their trust. Make them feel good. Just make them feel good. Don't be too hard with your stakeholders don't be too, listen to them. Don't go, when they're talking, you're interrupting. You're making them feel like, okay, maybe, oh, I know more than you do because I'm more technical, you're not technical. So you're making them feel like you know much more than they do. You're more experienced in certain areas. No, please don't do that. And then tailor your communication to your stakeholders. Yeah, tailor your communication to your stakeholders. Know what Tolu can help with, know what Wumi can help with. Okay, so very quickly, I'm being mindful of time that we've got a couple of minutes left. Let's look at our stakeholder metrics. Power, interest, grid. I've mentioned this a couple of times earlier on. Now, this is what your stakeholder metrics would usually look like. And it's easy. You can map it out yourself. Yeah, and it doesn't mean that once you've mapped this out, you don't need to share it with all your stakeholders to say, this is our stakeholder metrics. I have mapped it out. No, you really don't. This is like your document to keep, really, like I would say to people. Now, your stakeholder matrix templates can be used to identify the stakeholders for a project, include their level of influence, what issues are most important to them, and how they will make it. So you would see that on here, we have the low level on the left side on this axis, and we have high level on this axis. Now, the axis on your right here, that is your impact and power, influence side, and then you have your interest and involvement. So this tells you what level of impact or power or influence a stakeholder has on the project, and what level of interest or involvement that they have. So on the top left here, we have, okay, let me start from the top right, actually. So you have the high power, high interest. And how do we know this is high power, high interest? We know this is high power, high interest because we have the high power axis here at the top, and we have the low power here. Yeah, so for the high power, high interest, apologies, we have the high power axis here, and we have the high power here as well. So this stakeholders falls under the high power, high interest, right? So high power, high interest, these are your stakeholders, your key stakeholders. They have high influence on the project, and they have high interest in the project as well, and they require your full attention. This level of stakeholders, they can include, I just put some examples there as well. So, you have your SMEs, you have executives, you have your investors, you have your sponsors, business leaders, product owner. They are the most important stakeholders, and you should prioritize them, keeping them, sorry, is it 9 o'clock already? Okay, no, I have 10 minutes left. So keeping them, sorry, I just lost my, okay, yeah. So they're your most important stakeholders. You should make sure that you're prioritizing them and you're keeping them happy with your project progress. And then you have your high power and your low interest. Now, for the high power and low interest, they're your secondary stakeholders, and they do have a high influence on the outcome of your project. However, they do not have direct interest. So they have high power for low interest. So because of their influence in the company, you should work to keep these people satisfied, keep them satisfied. Yeah. Now we have the low power and high interest on here as well. So for these stakeholders, these are stakeholders who have a high interest on on the project. However, they lack the power to create any impact. They can mentor, they can support, but they are not directly involved. So you want to keep these people informed and check in with them regularly to make sure that they are not experiencing any problems on the project. So you want to keep them informed. And then finally, you have the low power, low interest stakeholders. So these are the stakeholders who they barely have any influence and they barely have any interest on your projects. So you could have people working in departments or industry not directly impacted by your project. So just keep these people, I put two examples there, help desk and system admin. Keep these people informed. Keep them informed. So I'm going to move on very quickly because of time. What I have here is just something I call the project stakeholder impact analysis. And basically what this is like, you have your stakeholder matrix that highlights the stakeholders on the level of the power and the impact that they have on the project. Now, what I usually would use this for is, I have my stakeholders names on there, impact of the project on them. How does the project impact this stakeholder? How does it impact that stakeholder? What level of influence does this stakeholder have on the project? What level of influence does that stakeholder have on the project? Now, what is most important to this stakeholder? What is most important to that stakeholder? How could the stakeholder contribute to the project? Strategy for engaging the stakeholder. So these are some of the things that you can have mapped out somewhere and keep for your own use to help you with your stakeholder management, right? Okay, finally, I think what we have here is the stakeholder involvement. So there's something we call the RACI mapping, the RACI document. So, so we have the RACI, sometimes you have people adding the S to it for support. So each letter in the RACI acronym defines the level of responsibility that each person involved in the project will have on an individual task or decision or milestone. Yeah. Now, using your RACI matrix for a project would help you to eliminate confusion, because then you're able to identify who is doing what at a more granular level. So you have the how, which is responsible. The people that are doing the work to complete the task. Accountable. Who is accountable? Only one person can would usually take on that accountability role. Who is accountable for this if this does not get done? Consulted, someone or people that would provide input based on how it will impact their project or work or domain of expertise. Informed, people that needs to be kept informed, need to be kept in the loop on project progress. So this is what I put an example here of a stakeholder matrix that I would usually use. Right, so I have the roles there. I have my so for each of this activity, this person is responsible at this stage. This person needs to be kept informed at this stage. This person needs to be consulted at this stage. When we're gathering requirements, this person needs to be consulted. This person is the BA is accountable, responsible. The developers needs to be kept informed about the requirements. About the requirements, just making sure that you have your RACI document mapped out on a plan to make sure that you have on there, identify who is responsible for what, who is accountable for what, who needs to be kept informed, who needs to be consulted. When you have your business as subject matter expert, the SMEs, in a lot of time you want to keep them informed. Aside from keeping them informed, that's, some stages you want to consult with them and things like that. So that's usually what your stakeholder metrics would. So these are documents, some of the documents that are actually really helpful for us to manage and work effectively with stakeholders. I think that was the last slide, actually. I hope I went through that really quickly. Let me see, what's the time? So, oops, okay, 4 minutes. All right, apologies, guys. I had to really run through that so I can get through all the slides as best as I can. And I'm sure, we have the recording as well that you can always listen back to. But we've got 4 minutes left, and I'm happy to take any questions within the 4 minutes, or let's say 3 minutes for questions, if anyone has any questions. Except if I've gone really, really fast, you didn't even grasp anything. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Tolu. Good evening.
Hi, Isaac. Good evening.
Hello.
Yeah, my question is, at what point do we start working on the documents like the RACI matrix and stakeholder mapping?
Okay, so I would say from the point when you join the project, once you've joined the project, at what point you join, if, the moment you join the project, you want to start understanding who your stakeholders are. You want to start on identifying who your stakeholders are, because these are people that you will be engaging with. And, without knowing who they are, there's no way you know who to engage with. So I would say from the very start, when you join the project, it's good to start asking certain questions and start to identify who these guys are. The moment you start to identify them, you get a list of them, put your list down, then understand the different impacts on the project, the different, how would I put it now? Interest in the project kind of thing. Do you get what I mean? Once you have an understanding of that, you note that down. That would help you in, mapping out your stakeholder metrics to say, okay, all right, Wumi is a sponsor of this project. She's an investor on this project. If Wumi is an investor or a sponsor on the project, that automatically would mean that, oh, okay, Wumi would have high interest and impact on this project. Then it helps you to map, put Wumi's name down on that side of the stakeholder matrix to say, okay, she has high interest, high power. And, so once you identify and you have in-depth understanding of the different roles of your stakeholders and where their interest lies within the project, it would help you to map out. So I would say, yeah, very early on in the project when you join your team, it's nice to have an understanding and being able to map that out. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, my name is Moyo. I'm a BA, and I want to know. I feel that stakeholder management is important for all the roles, but specifically for BAs. At what level do we, get involved with this, and who are really the most important stakeholders for BAs?
So for BAs, I would say all your stakeholders are important stakeholders. All your stakeholders, like we've just seen on the, so for BAs, knowing that even as a BA, you will be, engaging with stakeholders to gather requirements, to understand requirements, to analyze requirements. And there's no way you would do that effectively without actually identifying those stakeholders, knowing who they are. And once you've been able to do that, you need to, all your stakeholders are important, even the stakeholders that have low power, low interest. We said they're the least important, we've said minimal effort to engage with them. We didn't say don't engage with them at all. We're just saying minimal effort. So all your stakeholders are important because they do bring something to the table. So it's good to have that relationship, with the help desk, system admin, have a relationship with them, make sure that, who needs to be kept updated, update them. Who needs to be consulted, consult with them. So from a BS perspective, I would say wherever you work, it's different for different organizations, but please identify who they are and understand their level of involvement and the impact and interest that they have on the project, and that would help you to map it out. So all your stakeholders, I would say, are important, Moyo, if that helps answer your question.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, it's 9 on the dot, Wumi. I think that is us done. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope the session has been pretty helpful to us tonight. Please do watch the recording back if you still have questions. I'm sure you would get some points on some hits from the recording as well. But yeah, that's me done, Wumi. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That was very productive, and it was also a refresher for some of us. And really, thank you. Thank you for
thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tolu. Thank you.
So I'm going to be opening the breakout rooms. We know the drill. BAs, QAs, DAs, and SMs. For ADMs, I think yours is tomorrow or Friday, so don't worry. Okay, so sorry, apologies. I know it might be tiring that you guys have back-to-back. Don't worry, it's just today I'm doing back-to-back. But we all need to have an idea of stakeholder management so that we can know how to manage our stakeholders. because some of you don't know how to manage me. That's why I did this particular course just for managing me. I'm just kidding. Don't mind me. So let me open the rooms. Let's go into our rooms. Tolu, you know now. Thank you. All right, guys. Rooms opened. Please don't go if you are my guy. You know what I mean? You're my guy. So wait. Rose, you can go. You're already a co-host, so you can go. Ijeoma. Hi, Jay.
I'm here.
Hi, Jay. Who is your guy? You can go. I've done yours.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Kemi. No, Kemi is an ADM, so I'm not. Yeah. So Rose, Ijeoma, Samuel. Samuel is not on the call. Okay. Ibuku. Kemi, I need you, but I just did yours like that in case you need it. Then Ibuku.
So we are recording, right?
Definitely, but it depends. No. For you, Jama, you know the drill now. But others
Okay.
are recording. But in case
Okay.
anything comes up that you guys want to record, that's why I always make you a co-host for that.
Okay.
Sorry,
Thank
Wumi, have you stopped the recording for the session though? Because I think you're still recording this on the session.